Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to September. It's September. Yes, I can't remember what month it is. Welcome to Virtual Book Club Night tonight with Christine Reed, who's joining us from a coffee shop in North Carolina. Had to evacuate all kinds of crazy because of this storm that's affecting all of us. So if all of a sudden the power goes out, we'll catch you some other time. We'll reschedule. And we also have Bethany, another contributor to this wonderful novel, Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Thanks so much. I'm going to try to point. I always point the wrong way, whichever. She's next to me here. So all you guys, make sure to tell me where you're watching from. I think the authors always like to see what kind of bandwidth we're having or what kind of net we're casting out. So just in your comment section, say where you're watching from tonight. But I'm going to start off by just doing a brief bio from Christine. This is Christine's second time joining us in the virtual book club. This time she took on more of an editor standpoint and actually started a publishing company in her spare time while she's wandering the trails of the country. But just want to remind everybody that Christine is full-time on the road, but when she has her feet down and rooted, Denver, Colorado is where she's from. And I believe that's how we met because of my connection to Colorado. I'm not going to go too much into other items other than I want to talk specifically about a piece in the novel or in the collection, which each and every story talks about the traditional territory that someone is from. And so being in Denver, Colorado, the traditional territory that Christine is from on the lands before white individuals were there were the Ute, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho peoples. Christine is the founder of Rugged Outdoorswoman Publishing, and her award-winning memoir, Alone in Wonderland, was what we featured first, which was the story where she shares her personal transformation via hiking. She's been forged by nature, movement, and firmly believes in the power of story and representation to invite everyone into the outdoors where we can see ourselves more clearly. And you can follow Christine at Rugged Outdoorswoman on Instagram and also .com for more information. Christine, welcome. I hope we can hear you besides the trains and the coffee shop. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and I would love for you to introduce Bethany to us.
Yeah, I don't have Bethany's bio in front of me, so I'm just going to tell you about her. Bethany's story is the first one in Blood, Sweat, Tears. Sorry. And she is an amazing athlete who has set over 100 fastest known time records on different trails, largely in the Adirondack Mountains where she's from and still lives. And she is currently working on a forthcoming memoir that we are going to be publishing together. So hopefully you'll get to hang out with her again in the future.
Welcome, Bethany. Go ahead and say hi to everybody and tell us just a little bit about how you met Christine.
Well, hi, everybody, and great to be here. Thanks for inviting me. And Christine and I met, like so many meetings are these days on social media, and I was recommended to follow her, this unicorn lady who hiked a lot and, just talked, I would say, like real stuff, like the real stuff of trail. So I started following Christine on Instagram, and then it wasn't too long after that I saw her call. She put out the call for Blood, Sweat, Tears. And I also liked following her because I myself am a writer and a hiker, and she had already Alone in Wonderland out.
Fantastic. And I love the fact that as all of you are out there on the trails doing all these things, you're still organizing businesses and probably staying in touch with family or friends and dreaming up new experiences. Christine, tell me about since we met when we featured Alone in Wonderland, your memoir, and then now you're in the publishing industry. and you have Rugged Outdoors Women. Tell me how that all came about.
Yeah, I will say it was a bit of a windy road. After publishing Alone in Wonderland, I thought I wanted to write a second memoir, and so I was sort of trying to work on that. And I hiked the Colorado Trail, and I thought, okay, I'm going to write a book about this. And then I wrote 50,000 words about the Colorado Trail, and I was like, this is so boring. Everything out there was like perfect and sunshine, and nothing difficult happened the entire time I was on trail. And I was like, this isn't really a story. It's just me having a good time. And so I was like, there are some other things I'm interested in writing. So I sort of changed direction, and I'm really interested in writing some outdoor adventure romance novels. So something where the characters are like rock climbing and living in their vans and like doing cool outdoorsy stuff. And so I worked on that for a little bit, and it just wasn't coming together. And I was like, man, writing fiction is hard, which is so funny because I've had many other writers who write fiction say to me, isn't writing memoirs so difficult? And after I tried to write fiction for about a year, I thought, no, I think this is much harder. So I still have those projects sort of on the back burner, but I started to kind of reach around and talk to other people I knew in the space just about like what we thought we needed in this space and in the storytelling of the outdoor sphere. And I talked to a lot of other women, and I had been interested in writing or in putting together a women's collection. But I just didn't know what that would look like in terms of gathering the stories and putting them together, and what that process would be like. And I think that was holding me back from committing or admitting perhaps that I wanted to do that. And so I actually had a conversation with Nancy East, who wrote Chasing the Smokies Moon, which is about her FKT in the Smokies National Park. And she's absolutely lovely and a dear friend of mine. And I was like, yeah, I've always thought about putting a women's collection together. And she was like, well, why haven't you? And I was like, oh, I don't know, signing contracts and like doing all of that. It sounds really daunting. And she was like, you did all of this with no experience. So like, why wouldn't you be able to do that? And I was like, I guess that's fair. And at least going into this, I had the experience of having put a book together before. So a lot of the things were the same, but working with 25 authors was a totally new experience. And I think through kind of as that idea came to fruition and I decided, okay, I'm going to jump in and do this, the idea of becoming a publisher and helping other people put their stories out there had also been sort of in the back of my mind. Like at some point that might be a fun direction to go with my career. And so I said, you know what? Okay, this project is going to be my testing ground. I'm going to see what it's like to work with other authors, to do the editing, to go through the process of putting books together that doesn't belong solely to me. And it went chaotically at times personally, but it went well. And so I think I'm ready now to like move into the next step and help put some other women's and like non-binary and trans folks stories out into the world.
Fantastic. I was reading on your website, I think one of the categories you might want to add, not that I'm volunteering yet, but I just came back from a world voyage and I kayaked in every body of water I physically could. So it's something that maybe, I don't know. I keep spending so much time with authors. I'm like, there's got to be something that I'm supposed to be writing. I just don't know what it is.
For sure, yeah. And the umbrella for the publishing company is outdoors. So it could be, I'm probably going to have a lot of in the hiking, running space out the front because that's all the people that I know. But I hope to expand as quickly as possible into some other areas. I talked to a gal who competitively stand-up paddleboards about a project that she's working on. She's Canadian, and I would love to have that as part of the publishing company's scope.
That would be awesome. Well, I wanted you to ask Bethany a question that you may not have been able to ask her, even though you've published her first in Blood, Sweat, and Tears. The very beginning, we just dive right into the nitty gritty of everything that happens, good, bad, and the ugly, when you are hiking in the wilderness. But I want you to throw a question to Bethany, and then I'm going to have her throw a question to you, and we'll see where we are at that point.
Okay. Didn't come prepared for this.
On the spot.
I think, Bethany, why don't you talk a little bit about why you wanted to participate in this project and what you're hoping people will get out of it?
Yeah, great question. So the answer to that is I just felt instantly connected to this project because I wish I had thought of it 5 years ago, or I've been waiting for it for 5 or 10 years. I've been a woman in the outdoor education field for 15 years. I've worked predominantly with men. I've hiked predominantly with them, especially in the mountaineering space and the competitive trail running space. And I'm really tired of being the only woman there sometimes, and like having my story come through. And so when I saw this concept, and especially blood being about menstruation, I was like, this is real. This is going to be something. And this could be a book that comes out every year. And I I had been a college professor for a bit, and these are the stories that I would be sharing with my female students before we went out in the field. And the period, we just have to talk about it more too, because it unfortunately limits so many female athletes because we don't talk about it. And then girls are coming out of school, or they're not going to practice, or they're not going into the woods because they don't want to have to deal with having it on trail. So um yeah, the concept is brilliant. I love the play on all the emotions of blood, sweat, tears. And I think that answered the question, but if it didn't, let me know if I should elaborate. It was like goosebumps. It's just like, yeah, I want to be a part of that. I'll submit as many stories as I need to get one in, because I really, you have hundreds of stories after having thousands of days on trail, and it's different than being in a male body.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I wanted to ask you real quick before you ask Christine a question. You were, I believe you were published before in Trail Runner and Outside. Were those articles on a similar level, or were they more kind of what do I want to say, clinical or scientific or travel based, in the sense where you're like, this was where I went and this is what you experienced? What were those articles about?
Very good question. And they do tie together slightly. Aconcagua is my story in Blood, Sweat, Tears. So that was an expedition in 2019. It was a really shaping expedition because we had a high mountain rescue that I did write about for Outside. So like breaking through to Outside magazine was like really big for me in 2019. But then, and that was more clinical. That was really
Mhm.
looking at the brain at high altitude and what causes cerebral edema, what causes, like, are we more at risk if we're young or we're old? And that was awesome. That was a scientific dive into some of the experts in the field. And it was all shaped around this rescue that we had. Now, my story in Blood, Sweat, Tears, that's all like before the rescue. That's like getting into camp and just setting up and stuff. But 5 days later, we're having a high mountain rescue on that same expedition. What I have really written about, for Trail Runner, I love doing profile pieces on female athletes who are doing big things in the mountains. I love telling their stories. Um, and that's been predominantly my focus, is really on the ultra female athlete.
Wow. Inspiring. So inspiring. Bethany, I want you to ask Christine a question that you haven't had a chance to ask her in front of a YouTube audience or any other audience. Your turn. I'm putting you on the spot.
Totally. I have a question, because I think about this a lot, because when I think of Christine, I have no idea where she is in the United States, but she is getting stuff done. And she has a publishing company, and she put together this beautiful book. So Christine, I want to know, how do you do this on the road? You live on the road.
It's sometimes a lot of chaos. I over the years, it's been kind of a different, like, things change. In 2018 is when I got on the road. I hiked the Wonderland Trail, and then I was like, I'm going to write a book about this. So I went and got a computer from my dad's house that I had left there because I was like, what do I need a computer for? And I was like, I guess I'm going to carry this computer around and write a book with it. And during that period of time where I was writing all the time, I was doing that mostly either like coffee shops, libraries, van. But it was just writing, and I didn't have all this other stuff that had to be done. It was just like when I feel like it, I write. Once the book launched, I went on book tour in 2022, and so I was actually traveling a lot for book events, and so I was going kind of town to town, like speaking at libraries, speaking at gear shops, REIs, things like that. And then just in between events, I was going, same thing, coffee shops and libraries and stuff to work. This past year, at a certain point, I guess I was in the minivan then too. Gosh, I've been doing that for a long time because I had a bigger van for a while, but then I downgraded to a minivan. So this year, I actually, after Blood, Sweat, Tears launched, I sort of took a little bit of a break. So I've been still doing work, but not to the degree that I was when I was like on book tour full time. So this year I've been actually staying a lot more with friends, and kind of traveling a little slower, not that much slower, and then taking time off. Like I just took 3-4 weeks off to hike a long trail, and now I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna go to my dad's house, spend the holidays with him, so I'm gonna be there for a little bit, and it's gonna be like 8 hours a day of work. But it's so fluid, and gosh, I don't know if I'm doing things well enough to say like how it's done.
That's awesome. I understand how you feel, Bethany. I don't know if you know. Christine knows I'm in the travel industry, and that's where I make my bread and butter. And I call myself a nomadic worker because I will travel the world and try to take on new clients. And sometimes I do. Sometimes when I was in Asia and the Oceania down in Australia and New Zealand, I was like, this time difference is a little hard to manage, because I really did want to enjoy my experience in that part of the world. So I put a hiatus on taking on new clients, but I was able to keep working. And I think you get to the point where you understand your flow, and you have a calendar, and most of the time you can do it. Sometimes there's a total flub up, when you feel like, oh darn it, because like calendars, even with the technology, sometimes it's like, okay, was that booked in East Coast time or Mountain time? You're right. Or, now you're in New Zealand time the day before. It's crazy. Okay. Enough about me. I want to talk a little bit about your head nod to the traditional lands at the end of every story. There's a little bit of a bio, and Bethany, I can't pronounce the ones that can you? I got the first one. You're originally from Wilmington, New York, and it was Mohawk land and the territory of the
Haudenosaunee.
Haudenosaunee people.
Yeah, so that is the people of the Longhouse, and so Haudenosaunee means people of the Longhouse. Mohawk is one of the 6 tribes of that. There's the Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca, Tuscarora. So the area that I'm specifically in is mostly Mohawk territory, meaning people of the Flint. And there's still a very strong presence of them here. It's very unfortunate. A lot of Adirondack history just begins with that 1800s logging camp, rustic, outdoors dude. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of their history is written out. And I like that, Christine looked at that in the book, because I do think we overlook it a lot in America, that this was contested terrain. It wasn't just fought and won. There were treaties put in place, and then a lot of treaties were broken. And a lot of this land isn't rightfully American land.
Absolutely. And I was, I mentioned I was in New Zealand, and I have met a friend who is Indigenous Maori, and I've been learning a lot. And I feel like almost maybe it's just my research, but I feel like New Zealand and England have a much better respect for those lands and for those tribes than we do in the United States. We've got a long way to go. Christine, why did you decide to include that in Blood, Sweat, Tears?
I think the acknowledgement is important, and I have kind of like a two-part philosophy when it comes to like making your money off of recreating on the lands, is that you should acknowledge where these lands came from, like who we took them from, because a lot of times it's not just that they lived there, it's that they were sacred places to these people, especially the national parks, the places that we think of when we're like, where are the most beautiful places in the United States? Like, these people were going there for ceremony and sacred purposes before we were here. And the second like prong to that is that I believe we should all be going and volunteering on these lands. And like, if you use the trails, you should be doing trail work. If you recreate in these places, you should be volunteering with whatever the organization is that stewards that land. Especially if, not just if you recreate there, but especially if you are making your money off of, telling stories about it, or however, creating gear, whatever it is you do in the outdoor industry. I firmly believe that we need to be like giving back to those lands and acknowledging where they came from.
Absolutely. And a question that I had for each of you: what is the oldest person, female, that you've seen that was not a thru hiker that you met that was actually doing it? I just want to see what the reality. I'm serious. Like, it seems like every woman I know that's of age 58, 60, they're these spry little chickens with little bitty legs, and they have absolutely no body weight, and they're gazelles. I've ever since I met you, Christine, and I haven't done it, it's been several years, I'm like, I want to climb 14ers. I want to do something, but I find myself in the water more often than walking on land. So realistically, what's the demographic out there on these thru hikes, age-wise, for women?
I would say I quite regularly see women in their 50s and 60s. Men always, like, there's always men at that age when you're out. But I, like, even on the Colorado Trail, which is a challenging trail, and you're at elevation for quite a lot of the time, and that definitely takes a toll on your body. There were a couple of ladies, I would say we were about halfway through the trail, and I was hiking with a girlfriend. So this was two of us, and then there was these two older ladies that were probably 65. And they said to us, yeah, we had a really rough day. We only did 20 miles. And I looked at my friend, because we had done 12. And I was like, only did 20 miles.
Impressive.
Yeah. And I really do see women out that age all the time, especially, through hikes, women are a smaller percentage, older women are a smaller percentage, but I feel like, out on the trails are everywhere.
Yeah. Thank you. Bethany, what do you think? Have you experienced the same as far as who you see out there, women-wise?
Yeah, my first mentor, and I was about 23 at this time, and she was 63, and she was just this badass mountain woman. And she just, like, we would go out and we would do 30 miles together. She was still doing ultra races, and I just really, like, she set the standard for me, because I just looked at it as like, wow, this sport I'm going to do into my 60s and 70s, and like competitively. So she just set the standard for me, and that was back in like 2009. And what I see more like women doing this in groups now, and like sort of like retirement hikes and things like that. So if anything, I think it's going to keep trending upwards with that, as we see more women getting on trail now and like taking up space in the outdoors, which I've seen an increase in just the last 5 years with that. So I'm really optimistic. And yeah, the town I live in too, just, people are skiing down Whiteface Mountain at 80, and you're recreating until you can't anymore.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I think another follow-up question I have, based on your experiences out there in the wilderness, if someone has not done it for the first time and can't walk along with Christine or walk along with Bethany. Do you have, this is kind of a loaded question, a certain supplier or provider that's out there that you see a lot that you would recommend? Like, I know the company Backroads, but they're a very expensive, all inclusive, wonderful supplier, but they're not going to be doing through hikes. They're going to be sections. Have you seen any businesses out there that you would recommend to a travel advisor? Christine? Oh my gosh, it's raining really hard now. I'm going to turn my mute on. Sorry, go ahead.
I know Bethany's a guide, so she probably actually has more information on this than I do, because I don't know that I've seen any companies doing through hikes. Usually they'll do a few days here and there. And I know there's a lot of companies that do like walking trip kind of stuff where it's like you can do a week on the Camino or whatever, and they like shuttle your stuff and you're like staying in the hotels every night, but you're like walking all day. So there's tons of resources for that kind of thing, but I don't know more backcountry. I'll let Bethany talk about what she knows there.
Yeah, I will. I have a few suggestions. So, an American company called Adventures in Good Company. It is all female run. Now, it is probably moderate to on the higher end of cost. Unfortunately, a lot of travel companies are, I would say, higher costs. If you go internationally, there is a wonderful company in Nepal that is, again, all female based, and they're called Three Sisters Adventure. And even if you just Google them, this was started in the 1990s by three Nepali sisters who said they were not going to get married. They were going to F the patriarchy of Nepal and start this guiding company that helped Nepali women really have livelihoods in Nepal. And they started a nonprofit with it too, a school for girls. A lot of the girls who were being trafficked from Nepal into India. So those are two good female-run companies. Nepal, I put that on everyone's bucket list to go to Nepal and trek with the Three Sisters. If you're looking for like longer expeditions, there's Alpine Ascents does some good stuff. And then I work with an organization called She Jumps, and She Jumps is an all-women organization too. And they do a lot of fundraiser climbs, which is a really interesting model where you can raise money for yourself to go on the trip, but you're also raising money for the organization that's just getting more women outside. And they do, like a Mount Rainier. They do some of, more of the mountains out west, more week-long experiences. So those would be my recommendations.
Those are fantastic. I appreciate that so much. And
Yeah.
then we're almost out of time. We were going to do 30 minutes. I know Christine's at a coffee shop and I've got a Hurricane Helene coming in. I do have another question for each of you. And what international hiking have you done, or what is your number one destination that's on your calendar outside of the United States or Canada? And Christine, you go first.
I haven't done very much hiking out of the States. I did do some hiking in Australia when I went there in 2018. And in the Glasshouse Mountains, which if you've never been there, like what a spectacular place. But I don't know. The list goes on. I feel like because of the way that I live and travel in the van, and I spend so much time driving around the U.S., and I constantly, even in places, I've spent so much time in Arizona. Every time I go to Arizona, I see something new. And so it's almost hard to imagine having time to explore the whole world when there's still so much the U.S. I haven't seen. And I just went actually this summer up to the Adirondacks to meet Bethany in person. And we hiked one of the Adirondacks high peaks. And I was like, oh, I have to come back now and like do everything here because it's so beautiful. So honestly, I just don't like my scope just isn't even there at this point, because there's still, my list in the US just keeps getting longer and longer.
That's so inspiring. That's good to know that you feel like there's endless challenges and endless resources here in the U.S. That's fantastic. Bethany, what have you done internationally, or what do you plan to do?
Well, so I was really drawn to big mountains. At one point in my life, I was like, I want to climb the 8,000-meter peaks, Everest, sign me up. So I was drawn to Nepal right away. I mean, Nepal is, I've been there a couple of times and I love it. Like, to see the Himalayas, to trek in the Himalayas is a spiritual experience, to me. I've been to India, I've been to Argentina, and all of my travels revolve around either mountains or environmental conservation. And I've spent some time in Africa and Namibia in particular, and I studied elephants, and that was a magical experience too. Just like being out in the wild and camping in a tent and having like lions and hyenas outside your tent at night. So I just like to go to the more I guess like where you're either really connected to the landscape or the wildlife. Those places have drawn me in my whole life. So um yeah, there was a point in my life where I was like, I want to see it all, and then I think sometime in my 20s, I was like, I'm not gonna be able to see it all. So,
No, you stick with me. I'll get you there. I can get
hey,
I can get you to all the continents.
good. Well, yes.
Get
Well, Antarctica. I would love to see Antarctica.
Yeah. I was blessed to go to Antarctica last January,
Yeah.
a year ago, and it was phenomenal. And I kayaked and was in the water with humpback whales that were right next to me.
That's amazing.
Their blowholes opening and closing, smelling it, feeling it, just gosh, can't even describe it. It was so spectacular. So because of the time is our time is up to talk this evening, I just wanted each of you to explain to those that are watching or that will watch later how people can follow you and what you're working on next. And I'll have Bethany start, and then Christine, I'll have you wrap up, and then we'll say goodnight for the evening, and everyone needs to go stay dry somewhere.
Great.
Bethany, what's next for you?
Oh, well, what's next? I'm working with Christine. She's my publisher, and I'm just so stoked to have her as that because I love everything she represents. And so it's a book on FKT, so a fastest known time that I did in 2020. So it's set against the pandemic and what's going on for me personally in my life at that time, while also trying to make history for women in the Adirondacks. So it's coming out next year, and I'm very excited about that. And if you want to follow me in my adventures, I am predominantly on Instagram at bethany.climbs.
Fantastic. And maybe we can have you come back after you publish your book.
Yes, I would love that.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Christine, what are you working on? What's next?
I am working on publishing Bethany's book, and I am also looking to acquire one more book this year for future publication. My goal is to be publishing 10 books a year by 2030. So I think the next couple of years are going to be pretty buckled down, like making those connections, finding people that want to tell their stories, figuring out who's working on projects and how I can be involved. And just getting more excited about putting more women's stories out there and like trying to level the playing field when it comes to the bookshelf. I was recently in a small bookstore in Concord, Massachusetts, and I asked, do you have a section with like adventure books? And they took me over to the shelf, and there was one book by a woman on the entire shelf. So I was like, okay, I know that what I'm doing matters because I can see it here,
Absolutely. So if someone is listening or watching tonight that says, hey, I've got this great outdoors woman story, how do people get in touch with you?
My website is ruggedouhtdoorswoman.com, and there is information there about how to submit. But right now, because the company is small, I'm accepting direct submissions. So if you are the writer, you can send me a query letter and your manuscript for consideration directly, so you don't need to have an agent.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, if I meet any authors down here in the Low Country that are on that repertoire, I just realized there's one more question I have to ask before I let you go. Okay. When I see this illustration and this cover, I see a uterus. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So I got it.
But it's made of alpine high elevation flowers.
It's beautiful. And I last virtual book club meeting we had at the end, I was saying, okay, next we're reading Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Take a look at the cover and tell me what you think you see. And nobody responded. And I'm like, okay, either didn't listen to me or you can't see it. So anyway, so I think it's very unique. Who created the illustration for you?
The artist is a woman who lives in Washington. Her name is Sarah Colfan, and she is a mountaineer. So I actually wanted everyone involved in the project to be women from the outdoor space. So I had her do the cover, and then the editor also used to be an editor for Alpinist magazine, and so she is also a very outdoorsy woman, which was cool.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Christine, I want to thank you so much for coming back on, and I enjoyed Blood, Sweat, Tears. I hope that if there's people watching tonight that haven't read it, that you pick it up. You can get it directly off your website, ruggedouhtdoorswoman.com, or hopefully in more bookshops across the trail Mecca. And Bethany, it's an honor to meet you. I can't wait till your book is out and we can have you come back and join us on the virtual book club.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay dry, everybody. I'm going to end the live. Have a good night, everyone. Take care.